Speaker. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'd just like to start by recognising the officials who worked on the bill, the Chair of the Select Committee and all the members of the Select Committee. I think it was a fair process if it wasn't a constructive outcome. As a part-time member of the Select Committee, it took me a while to grasp what this bill was all about, and because I thought it was going to be about improving education. And eventually I grasped that it was about extending control and facilitating business governance. And thus I came to agree with some of the other speakers in the committee stages yesterday who said it had been misnamed. The Education Polytech Amendment Bill could be more accurately described as the Gut the Polytechs Council's Bill, or, quote, the Desirable in Principle Retro-Racism Bill, or perhaps the Yes Minister You Choose Bill. What has it got to do with improving tertiary education? We do not know, and the government was certainly not able to explain it at the Select Committee. And I do agree with Marion Street's comments on the speech the Minister just made to explain it, but it hasn't really helped. It seems like one of those weird niche ideas that someone has dreamed up in response to a challenging educational environment. And maybe if we severely cut the numbers of people on councils, everything will magically be more efficient. And sometimes I think if I hear the word efficiency in education again, I'm going to have a tiny breakdown. Because what is so efficient about reducing tangata whenua, community, union, employer representation on a Polytech Council? What test of efficiency are we using? What is so efficient about reducing councils to 8 seats and then ensuring the Minister selects half of them? Who will be efficiently marginalised? Now, this bill is built on a number of bad marginalising concepts. Bad idea number one is to get rid of any Māori representation as of right. The Māori Party put up a perfectly good SOP on this issue, and Marion Street also attempted to get the bill back on some kind of fairness track. And the Māori Party described positive working models whereby mana whenua and politics are now working together on councils to ensure that the interests of the many Māori students are well looked after. The Minister just implied in her speech that the problem with this kind of representation is that it represents a particular interest group, not the interests of the Polytechnic as a whole. This ignores the fact that some parts of the community get systematically forgotten unless their interests are actually at the table. It ignores the fact that although we can work for the good of the whole from our different places, we cannot actually speak for each other. I cannot speak for Māori student needs, even though I have spent many years teaching Māori students in Polytechnics. That is why we need Māori and students at the table to make sure that the invisible is made visible. It's a bit like Parliament. Who would want only one culture, one gender, one class or age group making all the decisions in this place? Who gets invisibilised in that process? Then there's the small matter of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the articles which relate to governance of tauiwi and rangatiratanga of tangata whenua. Without giving you a 3-hour lecture on the articles of the treaty, I'd just like to point out that the relation— I know you'd love it. I know, well, I could do it brilliantly, but I'd just like to point out that the relationship was established in 1840, and the opportunity to make that relationship vibrant and effective exists through arrangements between mana whenua and Pākehā institutions now. To deliberately reduce Māori representation at the same time as endorsing a Māori flag is a deep contradiction this government needs to explain. This issue is not just important for Waiariki Polytechnic or Te Tairāwhiti Polytechnic, but for the southern campuses and the city campuses as well. Honouring Te Tiriti is not just about numbers of Māori students on campus. It's about the right of mana whenua to assert the issues associated with the whenua, whānau, hapu and iwi where the Polytechnic is situated, and from a mana whenua perspective. Why would we step back from that relationship and write a bill which reduces rights of representation to the phrase, quote, desirable in principle? The student representation is very important on Polytechnic boards. It's very hard to get student representation as Polytechnics are traditionally less organised and unionised, especially in the smaller regions. But a student representative plays a vital role in grounding the council decisions in the reality of the experiences of the student body. A teacher or an administrator or a ministerial appointment cannot see the world through the eyes of the student, who is living with the debts, the workload, the campus infrastructure and the social challenges of that particular environment. To meet the student needs, a council needs to hear a student voice, not as a lobby group at a meeting, but as an equal with a place at the table as of right. And the staff or union representative is also important because the teaching staff live with the consequences of all council decisions and have a unique perspective. There are many community people who should be at the table presenting their views and knowledge, and not just one person alone amongst a group of insiders. How well will the group of at least 10 people serve their Polytech really depends on a good process, on trust and on good leadership within the group. So why would the Minister be the one appointing the Chair and the Deputy Chair? A council can appoint any configuration of 8 people that's what the government's going to tell us. You can choose. You can choose which ones your particular community requires. But what they're not saying is that with 4 ministerial appointments, you can only choose 4 from either the former statutory appointees or from your community. You cannot have both those of right. As I said in the committee stages speech, the issues facing Polytechnics are very challenging. They include financial survival in a difficult economic environment and walking the line between community education provider and user pays pressures, which successive governments have ratcheted ever upwards. The Polytechnics are required to be in the touch with the needs of local employers, now without necessarily being able to include those employers on their councils. They are supposed to provide for cultural and educational diversity, often in communities where people have very little money and no extra resources. And I'm speaking from experience, having worked at both the Bay of Plenty and Tairāwhiti and at Waiariki and in Wairoa in various outposts of Polytechnics. And I know firsthand the struggle to actually resource and meet the needs of students in these environments. And it's not about reducing the governance input. In order to keep up the growth and financial expansion that they're expected to do, they have to keep inventing courses and getting students signed up. And in some cases, the courses are severely undersubscribed and on the brink of being unsustainable. And the solution is not necessarily to cut the governance or cut the courses, but to actually invest in education. The pool of suitably qualified tutors can be very small, and small-town pressures to graduate students can be very real. So we need to be resourcing these institutions. On top of this, these Polytech councils will now be 50% externally appointed by people who are not necessarily connected to those communities in any way. Therefore, we would say this bill is not helpful. If Polytechnics are to flourish, the issues they brought to the Select Committee need to be respected. And although I was only one of the Greens members who sat on that committee, I heard a lot of the submitters and I read all of the submissions. And it is simply not true to say that there was enthusiasm for this bill or respect for the proposal around governance. Instead, we have this very, very strange law which nobody seems excited about or proud of or wanting to speak very long upon, and yet it will pass. No one will be better off, and the real challenges in tertiary education haven't been addressed. The Green Party is very aware of those challenges. We think that we should be addressing those through legislation and through our Select Committee, but they haven't even been discussed because they are not on the table through this law. So I'd have to say that this is a bad end to a sad year for education, and we will not be supporting this bill. Kia ora.
Speaker.